First phase we're going to talk about is the form phase in this system. So the form goals in order. We talk about mental engagement, stance and posture, alignment, and angular motion. Now, if you subscribe to the BEST method or NTS, whatever you might call it, that's established by Coach Kissick Lee, this is the way I see it as far as what are the goals that all those steps are trying to achieve. Getting into holding, of course, is what we want to be able to get to, but in order to get there, we need to make sure about these four things. And again, the mental engagement is something we always want to have there through the entire shot process. I'm not going to go into the exact specifics as far as what to teach and how to teach it. That should be another video series as far as stance and posture, alignment, and angular motion, and how to teach those. But form goals in order. So the reason why I say this is that you don't want to create angular motion and focus on that unless you have the alignment set. And you don't do the alignment unless you've got the posture and stance there. And we don't start anything until we're very clear about what the mental engagement is. So what do we mean by mental engagement? The archer's ability to be conscious of what they're doing through the setup, load, anchor, transfer, and then deciding to expand, which is their ability to transition into a single focus of being able to make sure that they keep their focus on expanding, driving the shot. They decided to now expand and have the release happen, and they get to follow through, right? So their mental engagement is to make sure that they're not trying to just, let's say, pull through the clicker. But their mental engagement is to ensure that they are mentally aware and consciously aware of how they are picking up the bow, how they are pulling it back, how they anchor. Okay, they're reaching all those little checkpoints, those little feel checkpoints, right? How does it feel when I settle into my setup position? How does it feel when I anchor? Okay, that all feels consistent, that all feels good, great. Continue on with the rest of the shot. And that they're mentally engaged and that they're not sort of checked out or running on autopilot. So it is a mental engagement to keep themselves consciously aware of what they're doing as they're going through and doing the shot right up to the point when they decide to expand and at that point they have a singular focus to drive the shot through the release and get to the end of follow through. So that's what I mean by mental engagement. That's one part. The other part is to make sure that they are evaluating and each shot. So they execute that shot, then they are saying, okay, what happened? Where did it go? How did it feel? Okay, that's the assessment. And then being able to say, okay, what's the adjustment that I need to do for the next shot? Do I need to do anything differently? Do I need to aim higher? Do I need to make sure I keep my bow arm up through the shot? How do I keep my bow arm up through the shot? Well, the coach said I need to keep bracing through the shot. These sort of things. So the archer needs to be able to make sure that they have the right mental engagement during the execution, like I just described, but then they also need the right engagement in how they evaluate and adjust their shot for the next arrow, right? So that's what we mean by mental engagement. We want to introduce each form goal with a stretch band only. We also want to have an understanding of the progression of mastery should always be band, light bow, real bow, right? So if you're doing a form change, don't throw them on their 40-pound or 35 or pound real bow. Start with a stretch band, see how competent they are with being able to cognitively understand the change, implement the change physically, how they physically understand it. Okay, great. Let's go to a light bow and let's go to a real bow. Now, some very advanced archers, they'll be able to go through this pretty quickly, but beginners may need some time, maybe a form cycle, right? A couple weeks on band and light bow before they can even start using their real bow. So if the archer cannot perform the form goal with their real bow, then they should stay where they're at until to do so, stretch band or light bow. So if I'm teaching you how to stand properly with a stretch band and you're doing fine, and then you go to a light bow and you're keeping your posture, your core engaged, and all that good stuff there, but then you go to your real bow and you can't keep your posture, chances are that that bow is too heavy for you and you need to go back to the light bow and to work on that. Next part, why do archers not achieve the form goal? Typically it's bows too heavy, lack of understanding, minimal practice, right? They're not practicing enough. This entire system, I would say, requires archers to be able to practice 5, maybe 6 days a week in order to progress. If you're going to be competitive, you need to be able to put the time into it to get better. Shooting a couple times a week barely maintains where you're at. It does not create an improvement. And then also the quality of the practice. Oh yeah, I shoot 100 arrows a day. Yes, but are you paying attention to what you're doing for each shot? Are you able to do what I call the loop of the execute, evaluate, and adjust? So to get into kind of the scheduling, the understanding of the form phase here, we want to ensure the basic competency for the following. So we take the 3 to 4 months we want to ensure stance and posture, alignment, angular motion, and the mental engagement like we discussed. So again, it's not about getting every detail perfectly understood. It's about, do they understand, can they implement on some level what those things are and how they work? Now, you may refine those later on in time, over time. That's fine. But you don't want them to start competition season and be in the middle of competition season and say to them, we need to adjust your stance or we need to adjust your posture, right? That would be very hard for them to be able to adapt and overcome and then implement into their routine. So it's best to do all this before the beginning of the season, before the season, the competitions, outdoor competition season really starts. So we want to make sure the way we do this is we do kind of 2-week cycles for major changes to their form. So you have introduce the change in a one-on-one, right? Check for understanding, physical and mental, like I said, be able to do videos using one-on-ones. And I have a whole video that will explain what are one-on-ones, that they understand the tools that are used to help reinforce that change. So if you're teaching someone how to do alignment, then they understand what to look for when they're using mirrors or shot trainers or bands and videos and so forth, so they can do self-assessment and to be able to send you videos and for you to be able to check and assess, okay, this is what you're doing, this is what we need to update and help them understand. And to use one-on-one presentations as your guide, right? And I have that in a separate video. But the idea is that in that one-on-one, they should be able to walk away with an understanding of, let's say in this example, what stance and posture is, how to do it, and that is what they work on for the next 2 weeks. And depending on how well they do, you might move on to something else, like alignment, right? So you may spend a 2-week cycle on stance and posture. You may spend more than 1 2-week cycle. You may spend 2 cycles. You may spend a whole month just getting that right. Okay, fine. Then once they do, then we go on to alignment and angular motion. Again, this requires a 5 to 6 day weekly effort on their part to work on reinforcement of the change that was established in those one-on-ones you have with the archer. So here's an example. So again, this is not meant to be a complete accurate representation, but say cycle 1 stance and posture in that first week, okay, cycle 2 alignment, and we spend another week on alignment, still need some help, still not quite being able to implement it. Maybe they're able to do it with their stretch band and lipo, but we're having some trouble being able to implement it with the real bow. So we take a couple cycles for that, and we do the same sort of thing for angular motion. What does that mean? How does that work? Right? We take a couple cycles for that, and then we say, okay, now let's try to pull it all together, this total process, right? And we spend another 2 cycles for that. So just to kind of give you an idea as an example of like how this could look. So through all of this, right, through these sort of 4, 5, 6, 7 different cycles, we want to make sure we keep that mental engagement through all of it, right? Um, Here's just another visual example. So we want to always make sure we ensure proper form to prevent injury and create the correct muscle engagement that they need to be able to have. Because this is the foundation of what their form and process is going to be like for the rest of the upcoming season. Okay. And it's your job as a coach to ensure that they're able to stay honest with that and they keep that correction. Right. So even though you may move on to endurance and building strength and all those other phases, if they're not able to keep that, you have to remind them, okay, hey, we need to go back to this and remind ourselves of what it is to have that proper alignment or what it means to have that angular motion. And the reminding, if you have to go back to remind them, it's not going to be nearly as bad as the first time they were ever introduced to it. Okay, they can remember and they will be able to adapt it into their process more quickly.